Page 31. The Art and Science of Low-Carbohydrate Living. An expert guide to making the life-saving benefits of carbohydrate restriction sustainable and enjoyable. By Jeff S. Volek and Stephen D. Phinney. Section 1. Chapter 1. Overview of low-carbohydrate and ketogenic diets. 1.2. What does low-carbohydrate mean? There are two ways to define the threshold below which you are eating a low-carbohydrate diet. The first is defined by what you as an individual perceive it is that level of carbohydrate intake, be it 25 grams per day or 125 grams per day, below which your signs and symptoms of carbohydrate intolerance resolve. At one end of this experiential range, someone with early signs of metabolic syndrome, for example, high serum triglycerides and 10 extra pounds around the middle, might permanently banish these harbingers of ill health by holding total dietary carbohydrate intake in the range of 100 and 125 grams per day. At the other end of this spectrum might be a type 2 diabetic who, on a balanced diet providing 300 grams per day of carbohydrate, requires 2 shots of insulin plus 2 other oral drugs to keep fasting glucose values even marginally controlled under 150 mg/dl. For this person to achieve an optimum initial response that allows reduction, and hopefully withdrawal, of diabetic medications, clinical experience has shown that holding dietary carbohydrate at 20 to 25 grams per day is often necessary. For many type 2 diabetics, a few weeks at this level allows them to reduce or stop both insulin and oral medication while at the same time achieving better overall glucose control. A few months later, following substantial weight loss, some individuals might be able to increase daily carbohydrate intake above 50 grams per day and still maintain excellent glucose control, whereas others might need to remain below the 50-gram level to keep their type 2 diabetes in complete remission. In either case, whether it is being able to lose weight and keep it off, or putting a frank case of type 2 diabetes into remission, how much you choose to limit your dietary carbohydrate intake should be driven by your personal experience. As a result, the amount of carbohydrate that you decide to eat might vary considerably depending on your individual metabolic condition and the level of benefit you wish to derive. 1.3. Defining a nutritional ketosis. The second way to define a low carbohydrate is physiologic, specifically the level below which there is a fundamental shift in your body's fuel homeostasis, that is, energy regulation, away from glucose as a primary fuel. This shift is the adaptation of the body's hormonal set and inter-organ fuel exchange to allow most of your daily energy needs to be met by fat, either directly as fatty acids or indirectly by ketone bodies made from fat. This process, which is discussed more fully in Chapter 7, begins for most adults when total carbohydrate is restricted to less than 60 grams per day along with a moderate intake of protein. After a few weeks at this level, the primary serum ketone, beta-hydroxybutyrate, or BOHB, rises above 0.5 millimolar. At this ketone level, which is tenfold higher than that in someone with a daily intake of 300 grams of carbohydrate, the brain begins to derive a substantial portion of its energy needs from BOHB, resulting in a commensurate reduced need for glucose. With further restriction of carbohydrate below 50 grams per day, the serum BOHB rises in response to reduced insulin secretion. However, because dietary protein prompts some insulin release, and serum BOHB itself stimulates insulin release by the pancreas, albeit subtly, adults eating 20 grams of carbohydrate and 75–150 grams per day of protein rarely run serum BOHB levels above 3. This is in contrast to the response to total starvation, that is, no dietary carbs or protein, where the serum BOHB levels run as high as 5. This tenfold range of serum ketones, from 0.5 to 5, is your body's normal physiological response to varying degrees of dietary carbohydrate and protein restriction. This response range is called a nutritional ketosis, and is associated with metabolic adaptations allowing your body to maintain a stable state of interorgan fuel homeostasis. This process is dependent on an adequate, albeit minimal, ability of the pancreas to produce insulin in response to dietary protein and serum ketones, thus maintaining serum BOHB in the range where it replaces much of your body's, and your brain's, need for glucose without distorting whole body acid-base balance. Nutritional ketosis is by definition a benign metabolic state that gives human metabolism the flexibility to deal with famine or major shifts in available dietary fuels. By contrast, adiabetic ketoacidosis is an unstable and dangerous condition that occurs when there is inadequate pancreatic insulin response to regulate serum BOHB. This occurs only in type 1 diabetics or in late-stage type 2 diabetes with advanced pancreatic burnout. In this setting of deficient insulin, when exogenous insulin is withheld, serum BOHB levels reach the 15-25 range, a 5 to 10-fold higher than the levels characteristic of nutritional ketosis. Unfortunately, among the general public and even many healthcare professionals as well, these two distinct metabolic states tend to be confused one for another. Understanding how different they are is key to being able to capture the many benefits of nutritional ketosis while avoiding the risks in that very small minority of the population subject to developing diabetic ketoacidosis. To this end, a full chapter later in this book is devoted to the clinical use of carbohydrate restriction in diabetes. Page 35.